COVID got the president.
Yup.
Maybe. Or did it?
Oh, God. Yeah. Right before we started this, you just asked me if I had something to say. I have some shit to say.
Okay. Well, what the fuck?
Okay.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Welcome to While She's Napping. I am Adam.
And I'm Cindy, and I have some shit to
Why
say.
are you coming in hot?
Because isn't it that kind of week? Come on. Are you surprised?
I had a good week. The
Oh.
Bills won.
Well, there you go.
They're
That's all you
4-0.
needed, right?
The Blue Jays lost. They're out of the playoffs.
Yeah. But you were kind of expecting that.
Yeah, I didn't want
Yeah.
them to get swept.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah.
Well, yeah. Womp womp.
I'm just, week has been fine for me. I guess, right?
I don't even know anymore. What is a good... I don't even know.
I don't know.
There's just so much happening. I feel like a year has passed since we recorded our last episode.
I actually had to look up what we talked about last week.
Yeah, it feels like forever ago.
I forgot what
Yeah.
we talked about.
So I guess, so last week was our anniversary.
Yes.
We did So You Want to Get Married. Yeah, it
Which
feels like
makes it
forever
worse
ago.
that I
know.
forgot what we
Right?
talked about.
At least you didn't forget the actual anniversary.
That's true.
That's acceptable.
Yeah.
So, so this week we're kicking off our, lead up to the election. We mentioned last week how we were, going to try to stay away from this when we first started the podcast and everything, but it's just
Talking
not
about
possible.
COVID?
No, talking about the election and politics.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So, so we're going to start that with this episode and cover it really the whole month of October leading up to the election. Normally, I'm a super optimistic and happy-go-lucky person, I think, for the most part.
I wouldn't say happy-go-lucky.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm the kind of person who, gets excited about if someone says we're going to do an icebreaker at a staff meeting.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, but I'm just not feeling that way today. And so it is what it is. Sorry if I'm a little salty in this episode,
Well,
but it's been a rough week.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
go ahead.
I guess what I just wanted to preface this with is that this election to me is really not about politics. And I guess the topic we're covering today,
all elections are about politics.
Well, okay, I'm explaining.
Okay.
Yes, but what was illuminated to me or just confirmed to me by the debate last week, which also feels like 100 years ago, is this is not about there was no policy discussed during that debate. It was just a disgusting show of no level of human decency. So that is what I am focusing on, and I have never been someone to dive in and be super politically active or really speak out about it, but I can't anymore. So that is how I am viewing this election. I miss the days where we could actually have conversations that were about policy and disagree. I don't necessarily, I don't have a problem with people who have more conservative views than I do. I think
it's too bad we weren't adults for that.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some, earlier in our adult life, but
Listen,
it wasn't
my coming of age was Bush.
That's what I mean.
I didn't know. I just know you were supposed to hate Bush. I didn't know why.
Right. But I think the reasons why, people made fun of the way that he pronounced nuclear and stuff, like he said nuclear and whatever. I remember those little things, but really if that was the worst thing the president did was mispronounce a word.
Oh, I miss Bush. I wish we had Bush today.
That's what I mean. I think there are a lot of people in that position who never qualified as Republicans or were never conservative, who missed the days of at least having someone who had basic competency and basic decency to be able to even have a debate that discussed the policies that person disagreed with.
Yeah.
I wish I knew what I disagreed with. So anyway, that's what we're going to try to do today.
What are we doing?
So that's what we're going to try to do today is talk about something that yes, has a lot of emotion behind it as well. And that can certainly come into the argument. I'm not disregarding that. But at its face, it is a policy issue that it's discussed about what policy should be put forth, which one should not. And that's where we're going with this.
All right. Let's take an opportunity to do what we do. Let's thank people first, and then we can dive right in because you're coming in hot. So first
Sorry.
of all, no, it's fine. I get it. It's just coming in hot. So, Hey, if you're listening to this for the first time, we'd like to say welcome to the show. We appreciate you listening. Obviously, you clicked on this because this is a political issue that might be of some interest to you. So we appreciate you stumbling upon us. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, really wherever you get your podcast from, we appreciate it and we encourage you to subscribe to the show. Moreover, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please take the opportunity to give us 5 stars and a quick review. A large portion, based on the analytics of our listenership, is on Apple Podcasts. A very, very good chunk. I appreciate it if you guys can just take the 2 seconds out of your day, click on the 5th star over to the right, and just give us a 5-star review. It helps us out a lot. It encourages us, if anything else, even if you don't like the show, give us 5 stars. Moreover, we like to thank people from all around the world. The month of September was a very good month for us in terms of engagement. We'd like to thank people from the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, Germany, Norway, Austria, France, India, Sweden, and of course Nepal. Specifically within the United States, we'd like to thank everybody in our home state of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, California, Florida, New Hampshire, Texas, New York, Virginia, Delaware, Louisiana, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, New Mexico, New Jersey, Arizona, Michigan, Kansas, Georgia, DC, what up? Connecticut, Wisconsin, and of course, parts unknown. So obviously, there's a lot of swing states that I mentioned in there. So if you guys are still listening to this, we appreciate you taking the opportunity to go over some election stuff. As Cindy said, we're going to talk about issues around the election. I'd like to avoid things that happen within the election. I know
there's already a ton of coverage on.
Well, I know you had to bring up the debate. Obviously. There wasn't a lot of substance in that, unfortunately, which is unfortunate, not to be redundant.
Well, it's kind of what enforced us to do this topic this week.
Well, I don't know. I think we were planning on doing this anyway.
So I'm saying it reinforced that decision that let's just talk about a policy.
Yeah.
For God's sake, because there was none last week.
Sure. So that's what we're focusing on. The month of October minus the last week of October. We're going to talk about election issues or, things that have to do with the election. And today being the Second Amendment episode, this is of no exception, of course. Before we get into that, I think it's prime time to sort of I don't know,
take a deep breath,
reveal our political leanings here.
Oh, has it not been revealed?
Not explicitly on my behalf.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
So when it comes to how I've always looked at politics, I've basically taken the stance of actively trying to avoid it. I feel though that the older you get, the more difficult that is because, taxes you have to pay. You're more involved with your marriage, or if you're single, you, have to make life choices and whatever political influence there is.
Well, you start to realize how it affects you.
Right. As an adult, you come to realize that it's not just about, the outsiders. It does affect you a little bit. So when it comes to social issues, like, I'm just spitballing here. So gay marriage or abortion or even the social issues of Black Lives Matter. I am
civil rights.
Yes. I am very left. When it comes to property, I am very right. I feel that we as American citizens ought to pay as the least amount of taxes possible. I understand that a lot of these things are intertwined. We pay taxes and they help other things that, make us prosper. I totally understand. But when it comes to my property, my money, that is mine, that's just how I feel. I don't think the government should have anything to do with it. My property. Shared property, I understand, public spaces and whatnot. I understand that we have a duty and a responsibility to upkeep them. Wildlife, I understand its importance and its impact on the ecosystem, which makes me lean left towards environmental issues. Totally understand all of that. But when it comes to my house, my paycheck, my stuff, that is mine. And I feel like the government should have minimal influence on that as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously disagree, but I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I agree to a certain extent. This could have been a whole episode. I didn't know you were going to lead with this.
Well, I feel like it's important to get these things out there so people
Sure.
understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really interesting, actually kind of pretty related to the topic of the Second Amendment is
Sure.
I think the American kind of mentality of me first is pretty common. I'm not necessarily
Well,
saying there's anything
okay,
wrong
yeah.
with that. I think it's kind of human nature. But I also think we live in a civilized society. We live in we are also very social, and our communities, depend on things like us paying taxes. And I think that that's a lot of that mentality, I think, is what has kind of led us down this spiral of such inequality when it comes to wealth distribution and things like that, as the individual first. When that's the primary concern, people who are less fortunate, less privileged, whatever the case might be, get left behind.
I get it.
We have some social responsibility too, I think.
I'm not saying we don't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying when it comes to my stuff, it's mine. That's
Sure.
all. The
But I
government.
mean, theft is illegal. Like,
No, I understand that. I guess I'm saying exclusively when it comes to taxes.
well,
and
there are
stuff.
people who think taxation is theft. Very
Okay.
conservative people.
Whatever. If I had to choose today who I would vote for president, it would be Biden. But I do not like the idea that I have to vote for either of these candidates. I do not think either of them are qualified.
I knew you were going to say that. So I think, okay, we're getting so far into this, but
I just need to establish.
Sure,
this before we get
I
into
think that
these.
there's a whole lot to be said about our process when it comes to our elections, the Electoral College, and that people have strong feelings when it comes to the popular vote versus the Electoral College, and how
Sure.
dysfunctional that can be, and the fact that we don't really have something like ranked voting, and the fact, like, for us, I didn't even get to vote in the primary. I wasn't going to support Biden in the primary, but by the time it was our turn to vote in the primary, all the other candidates had dropped out. So I didn't have a choice. So literally, I didn't have a choice in who was going to represent my party. And that's not okay. I don't like that either. I don't like the system the way it is. But when it comes down to it, we have a month until this election. Like I said, it's about more than politics for me. It's about having just basic competency in our leadership. And there are, even though there are things that I wish were present in Biden's policies that aren't there, certain aspects that I disagree with, overall, I think he's going to build it. Is going to have an administration that generally supports the types of policies that I think are the best for our country.
Yes, he is the closest of the two to the policies that I align myself with, or rather the personal set of ethics and
Values,
yes,
sure. Yeah.
that I ascribe to myself. But at the same time, I feel that I'm voting for the vice president at this point when it comes to Biden. You look at the history of those that get into office, with the exception of Trump, because he's very much superficial and he's glamorized. So any signs of aging, he'll hide. That's just how he was raised. That's just how he is. It's a sign of weakness to him. I don't agree with it. But you look at, Clinton when he first came into office compared to 4 years later, it's a 20-year age gap. It looks like visually. Same thing with Bush. Same thing with Obama. Imagine the stress that it's going to have on someone like Biden. And this has nothing to do with his mental fit for office. I think that's very much overstated by people that don't want him in there. But imagine the toll, especially now, starting off your term with the pandemic, assuming that he gets elected.
You're coming into some hot shit.
Very stressed. I feel that is way too much stress for someone in his age group to sort of handle.
I mean, Trump is only 3 years younger.
I don't disagree. I don't think he's fit either. I'm just saying.
I mean, for way more reasons than his age.
People age sort of differently, and people, have more, of a deterioration process. I do think Biden is seemingly older than Trump.
I guess, but I don't even think that should even be part of the conversation.
Of course it's part of the
so
conversation,
many bigger
because you're
issues.
also voting for someone that I am not of the position that I feel that I need to vote for Biden just so Trump doesn't get reelected.
Me either. I think he does have some very strong policies. He is at least capable of laying out a plan to address the issues that we're facing right now, which Trump is not.
I get it, but my point is that I also want to vote with someone that I can have confidence in their longevity, and I don't have that in Biden.
I know we don't have that at all. So that's just the reality of what we're faced with right now.
I am 100% confident that Trump can live and be the way he is for another 4 years.
I think that's worse.
Okay. Okay. You can. I'm just saying. I think it's more likely that Biden will die in 4 years than Trump.
I mean, I hope not. I mean, he's been through a hell of a lot, and
I'm just saying, what's more likely?
I don't think it matters. Okay, then if that happens, then Kamala Harris is our president, and
That's
fucking great.
Exactly what I just said. I am voting for the vice president at this point, which is fine.
I hate the whole argument of lesser of two evils because I just don't agree with that. I think Biden, he's been in politics for a long time. You can't say, when you say, I don't like that you use the term that his age makes him less qualified. I think that might be a concern, what you're describing, but I don't think that has anything to do with his
longevity.
Okay, maybe so. I think that more speaks to his experience and capability and all of that. And I think in that sense, he's well qualified.
When I vote for someone for a 4-year term, I expect them to be there at minimum for 4 years.
Okay. But I think we have systems in place to address that,
Sure.
being the vice president, the line of succession.
I'm saying the candidate that I'm voting for.
Okay.
Not, all right. Anyways.
Anyway, we should have done a whole episode on
that's
this.
That's just where I stand. So when it comes to issues from the left or from the right, I find myself to be pretty moderate when it comes to things. And we'll start off with the Second Amendment. I don't have a horse in this race. To me, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other when it comes to the right to bear arms. I do think that it's important for us to sort of go over what the Second Amendment is. I do think it's important to go over both sides of the argument. And I do think it's important for us to at least vocalize a little bit where we stand on it.
Yeah. Can I give my preface real quick?
Well, hold on. Let me just say what it is. The Second Amendment.
Well, I want to say the same thing you just said about you're pretty moderate, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So I'm obviously very liberal on almost all issues. This is one that, like you, I don't really have a super strong opinion on. I kind of lean certain ways, but it's one where this is why I thought it was a good one to focus in on the policy, because I can see certain parts of the argument that I agree with, and I can understand from both sides, and I can empathize with both sides. So I feel like this is one that neither of us has a super strong stance on. So we're going to try to kind of give an unbiased overview.
Yeah.
Our biases will undoubtedly seep in, and maybe we'll discover which way we fall throughout this conversation. But that's where I'm coming from too.
So the Second Amendment is, I guess verbatim here, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So to me, it does seem pretty straightforward, but at the same time ambiguous in a way.
The grammar makes it ambiguous.
Well, it's
weird
old
commas.
English. It's old English.
Yeah, but
so
it's
we're talking about something that was written in 1789.
So I feel like that's part of the reason why it's so contentious is because the first thing is that people interpret it differently.
So you've had a conversation with someone that is very pro Second Amendment. I want to start there. I want to start with, and I did too, but we can go over your notes first because they're a little bit more in depth. I want to start with some of the positions, at least from this individual. And again, we're not saying this is how all pro Second Amendment individuals feel. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to accuse anybody for having the same opinions as the person you talked to and the person I spoke to. But I do feel like they're at least relatable to those that are pro Second Amendment. So what is it that stood out to you the most that he said to you when it comes to the reasons why he is such a supporter of the Second Amendment?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that was pretty clear to me, and again, this doesn't necessarily represent everyone. This is one person's take on it, but there doesn't seem as he and I were having this conversation, it kind of was illuminated that what is it exactly that people are disagreeing about? Because it seems like, from his perspective, all of the other avid gun owners that he associates with and himself, don't really have a problem with general regulation. Like, there are people who are constitutional purists about it, who read the Second Amendment and say, that means I can bear arms in any form. It doesn't specify certain types of weapons. It doesn't say in certain situations or after certain background checks or anything. It just says, I have this right, period, end of story. But in reality, it doesn't seem like he knows a lot of people who have that take. That
Yeah,
they
I don't know that
support
anybody is like, I can own a bazooka and a tank.
Exactly.
And that's my right.
Right. And they're okay with the fact that they have to go through some process. They have to apply, have a waiting period, have a background check, whatever the case might be.
How do you afford a
reasonable.
tank?
So it seems
Where
like
are you getting the tank?
There's a very small, it seems like it's more so a small minority of people who maybe have that more extreme view.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought that it was more prevalent than that. But, that's what it is when you have a vocal minority, I guess.
I do think that it's reasonable for people, even if you're a strict constitutionalist, that there are extremes one way or the other. Like I just said, a tank. I don't know that anybody that's a strict constitutionalist or hardcore, I guess libertarian would be the term.
Maybe, yeah.
That I said, hey, so you think you should own a tank? You think you should own nukes? Do you think you should own that? What are arms in this? Are they firearms exclusively? And if that's the case, do you think you should own a bazooka? Because I don't know anybody that should own a bazooka.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that to me is an incredible line of self-defense that you don't probably need.
Right.
In a general sense, in real world, everyday. Imagine robbing a bank with a fucking bazooka.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take a while to reload.
Well, and the other argument that I have towards that perspective of being, if you're a constitutional purist, is, and I don't even know if I just made up that term. That might not be a thing. But anyway, that it's an amendment in and of itself, and then there are many more amendments that have come after that.
Sure.
The Constitution has been changed many, many times. I mean, when the Constitution was written, women didn't have the right to vote. Slavery was still a thing. So I'm not saying that we should just throw it out the window and change it, willy-nilly whenever we feel like it.
Sure.
But I don't think that the conversation should stop there just because it's in the Constitution.
No, I get it. I just don't necessarily have a problem with people saying, hey, this is my constitutional right. I want to take advantage of it. And that may sound sort of dirty or sort of wrong, but to me it's really not.
No, I don't think so either.
Saying, this is my right, legitimately, this is my right as an American citizen. Why not? I guess the problem that I have with this is when people say, I do it because I can. I never like that argument for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Anything.
Yeah.
Pick your poison. I never was in favor of that sort of line of reasoning. So I'm not saying most gun owners have that line of thinking. I've just heard it before.
I definitely don't think it's the primary one, even if they do.
Like, why do you have, I don't know, a weapon that is very powerful? I'm going to get to this, but I don't know the terminologies. I don't know the various degrees of power when it comes to weapons.
Yeah, we should have prefaced that too. Neither of us have. Have you ever shot a gun?
I've never shot a gun.
Me
in my
either.
life.
So we were like, but we acknowledge up front that we are relatively uneducated on this topic, and we've done, like we said, we each talked to someone we knew who are avid gun owners and know a lot about the subject, and tried to make sure they were setting us straight with our terminology and at least try to get those basics right. But if we don't, let us know, call us out, because we're trying to learn.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting off track. What else stood out to you from the conversation?
Well, I guess so. I was thinking of this in my head, of outlining it by like, what are the common things that are currently proposed that people are for or against?
Sure.
Like when people talk about gun reform and someone is against it or for it, what does that even mean? Because I feel like a lot of people don't even know. People just like guns or they don't. And that's where the conversation begins and ends. So there are three major ones that I've come across often. There's universal background checks, assault weapons bans, and red flag laws.
These are people that are not in favor or have
No, these
concerns?
are like the three general like common policy changes that are being proposed when people talk about gun reform.
Sure.
It involves one of these three things.
Yeah.
So do you want to just like break each one
down?
down?
Go ahead.
And then we can weave in the opinions that we gathered. So when it comes to universal background checks, that was something that when my friend and I started talking about this, we were both like, well, what does that mean? How is that different from whatever is happening now? Because he said in his experience, I've always had to go through a pretty thorough background check.
It might mean more of a psychological background check, having to look up medical dispositions or whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know
think
about
that is
medical.
the biggest concern when it comes to individuals owning guns, or rather the thought of individuals owning gun, because of the amount of mass shootings that have happened. People, the NRA specifically, will say it's someone's illness that
Mhm.
led to these tragedies. And I think those that are opposed to, I don't say opposed to gun rights, but want gun reform, I guess you can say,
Mhm.
are
Stricter
saying, okay, well,
regulation.
we need to have sort of psychological evaluation so this doesn't happen again. I think that's what
Right.
they mean by universal
Right, because a
background
lot
check.
of times there are some cases where there's no apparent reason, like the Las Vegas shooting, which was the
Right.
biggest one in.
But that's an anomaly.
That's what I mean.
feel.
That's pretty uncommon. I think more often people look after an incident, after a mass shooting, people look back and say, oh, well, there were these red flags. There were these posts that this person put. They
But this guy
gave
had
this
nothing.
threat. Right. This guy, the Las Vegas shooter, had
Right.
nothing. But I think it is more common that in hindsight, people realize, oh, there were signs. But that we're kind of getting into red flag
Sure,
laws now.
yeah.
But so that what you're saying, I think, is more about red flag. But the universal background. So right now, so he and I were like, okay, what does it even on a federal level? It just bars the background check identifies people who are felons, people who have been guilty of domestic violence, or individuals deemed a mental defective from owning firearms. So that comes to the actual purchase of firearms. You cannot purchase a firearm if you fall into any of those categories.
Sure.
But then the issue, and this is, I think people talk about like the gun show loophole and stuff like that. That is only for licensed dealers. If you're doing a private sale, then none of that happens.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more open, and so it's unregulated at the federal level.
Right, but I'm talking about legal purchases of
So
guns.
that's what, when I was reading this, I'm like, private sales, like online, that's not illegal. It's just a private sale, but it's unregulated.
But if I don't have a license,
If you're not a licensed dealer. So I don't really know because I've never been through this process, but it doesn't, they're not saying illegally it has no regulation at the federal level. Of course not. If it's being sold illegally, of course it's not going to have any regulation, but they're specifically saying private sales online do not have any federal regulation.
oh,
So you buy someone from a private seller, you buy a firearm from a private seller online, you don't go through any sort of a background check, but it's not illegal.
Isn't the act of me purchasing it illegal if I don't have a license?
I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't
I
know
don't,
either.
but
That
I think you can
sounds
get a
like-
license, or does that all happen
I
at the
don't
same
know.
time? I
This
don't
is
know.
what I'm
But
saying. I
but the
don't
point
know.
is, so there was a bipartisan bill in 2019 that was passed by the House and got stalled in the Senate. It might even still be there. I don't even know. But it was to mandate background checks for all gun sales, including purchases made privately, whether online or at gun shows. And the other thing that was attached to this that made sense to me was that it would also extend the window for the federal background check, because right now, apparently, you apply or you go through the background check, it's initiated, and there's a 3-day window for them to approve it or deny it. And if 3 days pass and they don't move on it, it's automatically approved.
Okay,
And they're trying to extend that to a 10-day window.
sure.
To me, that seems like, knowing how slow the federal government works, that seems crazy to me that if it's not looked at, it's automatic pass. But that I can also see, okay, well, if the federal government is so slow and a law-abiding citizen who has a good reason for wanting to purchase a gun can't get it because the government is slow and their background check is held up for a month, that's not fair either. So I get it from both sides, but it's specifically the mass shooting in Charleston was actually related to this specific proposal.
Sure.
Dylan Roof, it was exactly this. He had things in his background check that would have prevented him from purchasing his firearms, but because the FBI took longer than 3 days, it was automatically issued, and then he went and killed people.
Immediately, though?
I don't know, but I'm saying, but the weapons that he used were only able to be obtained because of this
Okay.
3-day window. So there's a tangible example of a specific policy reform.
I feel that there's way more to that I can't speak to.
Me too. I'm giving the basic information about
Sure,
this
yeah.
bill and these proposals, but I feel like in cases like that, I mean, like, that's a tangible thing. You weigh the pros and the cons. Is this gonna really negatively affect a lot of law-abiding citizens? I don't think it 10-day window is a lot. If it's going to potentially save people's lives and decrease the number of people who are able to legally obtain weapons to, impart this kind of violence, I don't think that's unreasonable, personally.
Sure. I don't have a stance one way or the other. Doesn't matter to
But
me.
I feel like this is the first time I even learned about this.
Sure.
Like, people don't even know when they talk about gun reform. We don't know what the hell we're even talking about.
That's what I'm saying. I think when people talk about gun reform, what they're saying is guns are bad.
Right.
Right.
I think that's what it boils down to. It's oversimplified.
Because the shock and awe of a mass shooting, and you and I just found out, I wouldn't say just, I feel that I've heard this before, but in the event that this is news to anyone else, a mass shooting is at minimum 4 people.
Right. It's 4 or more people.
Which is, to me, that's very liberal with the term. When I hear
Right.
mass amount of people, I'm thinking more than 20 at the very least, and I feel that's too low.
And I think that's important that you said that, because I think that ends up really confusing a lot of these arguments, because when you look at the data and the statistics, it's always qualified by that 4 or more people. So when they say a mass shooting happens every day in the U.S., it's 4 or more people. And sometimes 4 people, that could be a robbery, an armed robbery, or a gang-related shooting, or
something.
even domestic. Like, that could be, I don't want to sound insensitive. 4 people dying is terrible. Like, like someone going in and shooting 4 people. I'm not saying that's nothing, but I'm saying in the typical.
That just sounds like homicide. To
Right. That's what I mean. Like, when we think of mass shootings, we think of things like Vegas, like Columbine, like
Yes.
Charleston, South
Yes.
Carolina, like all of these, where it was literally like a gunman who came into a public crowded place specifically with the purpose of killing as many people as possible. Like, that is what we think of in the common definition of a mass shooting.
Yeah, so a mass shooting has to be with the intent to murder. It has to be.
Oh, of course. Yeah, but I guess I'm saying, yes, the volume I think that we imagine in our head when we say mass shooting of the number of people who died, we're not thinking
5
4.
people, 6.
But
We're
it
not
makes it
thinking that.
very difficult to have the conversation because all the statistics are based in that.
I get it. I think that going back to what I said, I think what happens is that people see the amount of mass shootings, disregarding the actual definition of the term, or they see these tragedies like Vegas or like Columbine before it, South Carolina, you mentioned, Florida. What was the Florida
Parkland.
one? Yeah.
Well, that was this. Yeah,
What was the one of the
Marjorie
club?
Stoneman was Parkland. Oh, God, the nightclub. I can't.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. So, well, it matters, but it, they're all blurring together. Anyways, they see these tragedies and they think to themselves, okay, so it has to be the guns. Guns are bad. Let's get rid of guns. I don't necessarily think I can meet you there. I don't. Personally, for me, I get the idea that, why does anybody necessarily need an AR-15? Why does anybody need to use these guns specifically designed to kill people or to kill large animals or whatnot? I guess for hunting purposes it makes sense, but assault rifles. I know
Mhm.
I know AR doesn't mean assault rifle. I'm
Right.
just saying
Assault
the classification
style weapons
of
is how I.
Which, by the way, I found out that military grade, that term isn't a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that's actually
There's a lot of
military grade.
misnomers. Yeah.
Anyways, I sort of can see that, but at the same time, I'm saying, well, even if you are overly paranoid, for lack of a better way to put it, or even if you do believe that, hey, there's always a chance that the government can try to overtake its citizens. There's always a chance that this can lead to a tyranny. There's
Mhm.
always a chance that we will be left to defend ourselves as citizens against a corrupt and tyrannical government. We need to be armed and ready.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that doesn't sound likely, but to me, that sounds reasonable at the same time.
I agree. I don't necessarily fall into that camp, but I can understand why people do.
So in that instance, I can see why someone would say, I have it as an insurance policy just in case.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's a just in case measure. If I never have to use it. And I think most people that do own guns are thinking to themselves, I hope I never have to use this on a person.
Absolutely.
But if I need it,
right,
I have it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I don't have an issue with that.
Me either.
I have zero problem with that.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, I feel like the vast majority of gun owners feel that way and don't have a problem with the level of a reasonable level of regulation, because those types of people aren't going to be prevented from getting their weapons.
But
because
I do also understand why someone would say, the more restrictions you put on the laws, the gun laws, the more you're in violation of my Second Amendment. Because I do believe that there is a slippery slope argument to be made. It's saying, hey, I understand we can't say things on national. Well, you can say them, but it's not illegal to the government. Like we've said this before, this freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want without being punished by the government to a degree. Like you can't yell bomb on a plane. That is illegal. That is in violation, quote unquote, of your freedom of speech. But to me, I'm thinking that's kind of reasonable, right? You shouldn't. There's
it
no
can
reason,
cause other people direct harm.
Right. There's no reason to yell bomb on a plane for shits.
Right.
Right. So I understand why that, especially with what happened after 9/11 and whatnot, I understand why that is sort of an infringement on your freedom of speech. But I think any reasonable person would say, I don't really give a fuck if that's a law. Right. But if I can't go out and say, I don't know, fuck Biden, fuck Trump without the government coming at me, I think that's a
problem.
That's a problem if they do. So I can understand why someone, I don't necessarily think it would lead to this, but I understand why someone would say, hey, it's my gun rights now. Tomorrow it's going to be your freedom of speech. Tomorrow it's going to be your Fifth Amendment privilege on the stand. Tomorrow it's going to, sort of violate your freedoms. And I don't necessarily think it's going to get there, but I understand why someone would have that paranoia, or at least that sense of this may happen.
I mean, I get that it's a possibility, but I just don't necessarily think that's a good enough reason to not even consider making changes if it seems like that is in the best interest of our society.
All right. Well, let's take a pause right here because we probably need it.
Yeah.
And
deep breaths.
Yeah. Hang tight. But yeah, I could totally see why that would be on the mind of someone that thinks, look, you're taking away this from me in terms of my Second Amendment right. What's to say that you're not going to take something else away from me?
Right. So that being said, I think the next thing, the second reform measure that's often talked about is the assault weapons ban. So that to start, so already automatic weapons are banned federally. They have been for a while, for like 20 something years.
Sure.
And from, again, my conversation with our avid gun owner friend, that most gun owners are okay with that. They don't want automatic weapons. They say, I have no need for that. The only purpose of an automatic weapon is to kill a lot of people very quickly. I don't need that. And they're okay with that. So that brings me back to, well, if it's a slippery slope argument, like, why aren't they just like, I should be able to have an automatic weapon just because it's my constitutional right?
I do think people believe that's true.
You're right, but I think it's a pretty small minority.
But that doesn't mean that they don't think, they can think at one hand, I don't need it, I would never buy it. But I think they can also think on the other hand, don't take away my right to buy it.
But that's what I'm saying. But they're not opposed to the ban. They are okay with it. They think it's reasonable.
He thought it was reasonable.
Sure, but and his circle, he said all of the people that he knows generally agree with that stance. And he also said, this isn't a quote, his panties didn't get in a twist about the bump stock ban that happened after the Vegas shooting, which is the you can change a standard assault rifle into an automatic weapon by adding this bump stock.
But that's not taking away your arms. It's taking away an accessory.
I know, but these same people, so him, for example, so he had no issue with bump stocks being banned because
sure,
its only purpose, again, is to make it an automatic weapon, which only purpose is mass murder. But he does have an issue with things that are proposed that limit the magazine capacity so they want to limit it to, I think, 10 instead of 30 rounds because they think that will minimize a shooter's ability to kill a lot of people.
Sure.
His argument was twofold. It was that he doesn't think that would really make a big difference because the 2 seconds it takes for a person to change the magazine isn't going to make or break someone's ability to stop them in most cases. But I said, well, other than that, what would be your reason for not supporting that type of a measure? And his main argument was that it's really inconvenient for someone who's just shooting for sport or practicing at the range or whatever the case might be to have to change the rounds that often is a pain in the ass. And I mean, I get it, but I don't get it because I feel like when you're comparing that inconvenience with if it was going to save people's lives, that doesn't seem like a good enough reason to me. And he agreed, but again, he went back to, but I don't think it would reasonably save people's lives. So what's the point of banning it? Because then it becomes a slippery slope thing.
I don't know. I know that
there's
it
no
would or
answer to
wouldn't.
that. I know. He and I didn't come to an answer. That's why this is such a complicated topic.
Yeah. See, I don't know. These terms like bump stock and automatic, fully automatic, whatnot. Those have such a I don't want to say negative connotation, but they sort of do to people that aren't gun owners. They're scary terms, right?
And they look scary. They're scary weapons.
And I think when people hear, get rid of them, ban them. The only people that are in favor of vocally, I'm talking protesting and pushing measures to get rid of these sort of things, are those that don't have them, right? So
in most cases, I think you're right.
You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to putting limitations on speech and whatnot, or any sort of amendment, anything, I feel that you have to have an understanding of both sides. Right. I do feel that. And again, I'm not saying, people will go back to the bomb thing on a plane. You don't have to say it in order to be like, oh, that's why it's wrong.
Right.
It's sort of intuitive. But at the same time, I think there's a universal agreement when it comes to that and saying, yeah, it's kind of fucked up. But when it comes to guns, again, the reason why I don't have such a strong stance on this and the reason why I don't vote when it comes to it, I don't care. I'm pretty indifferent is because I don't know enough about the other side. All I know is I've never shot one. I never held one.
Well, on the other hand, I feel like a lot of the people who are very active in the gun reform movement are people who have been directly affected by it, whose kids were killed in a mass school shooting or something like that. And yeah, they might have not been gun owners themselves. And there's a huge emotional component to that. And that's what, even in this discussion that my friend and I had, I was like, I don't hold that against them, though. If you're a parent who lost a child in a school shooting, or if you're someone who lost anyone in one of these events, I'm not going to give you, if I'm a very, well-informed gun owner or whatever, I am not going to hold it against you if you use the wrong terminology. But if you're going to bring it to the point of proposing legislation or trying to bring a bill to the Congress to try to get policy change that does affect people's constitutional right, I think at some point you do have a responsibility to make sure you actually understand what it is.
Yes.
And that burden shouldn't necessarily be on the grieving parent, but there should be people involved that do understand.
And you sort of said it already. I do think there's a huge emotional component to that. So for instance, you know this, I've lost to someone from obesity issues. And to me, that had a huge impact on my life. We've talked about this on a previous episode. It's a very big reason why I try to keep in shape, try to eat right, try to limit my caloric intake. I've completely boycotted fast food, not just for the shitness of it, but for other reasons too. Does that mean I should go to legislation if there is some introduced that say we should ban fast food?
Well,
I would love to, but at the same time, that limits people's freedoms.
But it's not your constitutional right to eat fast food.
But no, it is. It is your right to be able to put anything you want in your body. That's your right.
That's not explicitly stated in the Constitution like the Second Amendment is.
I'm just saying, if you want to eat shit, you have that right in America to eat shit as much as you want.
Right, but there's an argument for the way it's marketed and how it's the company's
completely get it, but guess what? That's up to the individual to research that. That's up to the individual.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So just because I lost someone to obesity, does that mean I should push this? No, not really, because yes, that affected me. That had a negative impact on me, but still, that doesn't mean I should try and, really push for limitations on someone's freedom to, for lack of a better way to put it, kill themselves by eating fast food all the time. That's up to them. I should have no influence on that. That doesn't. At that point, the affected nature of it is just me and the individual that died. The other people around the country that are unfortunately having negative consequences as a result of eating too much fast food have nothing to do with me. They have no impact on me.
I think you're oversimplifying it a little bit.
My point is if you unfortunately lost someone from gun violence, that's terrible. But that doesn't mean that the vast majority that we already said that are responsible gun owners have to, quote unquote, suffer the consequences as a result.
So that's yes. But what I'm saying is if there is a tangible thing, like going back to the whole, like, more than 3 days for the government to complete the background check, if they're not reasonably able to do it.
I'm just talking about banning the weapon.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not I'm sorry. Okay. So yes, we'll get back to the banning of assault weapons. I think one thing that he told me that I didn't know that was interesting was that basically a standard hunting rifle is exactly the same thing as an AR-15, and no one is trying to get hunting rifles banned.
I wouldn't know that, but I have no reason to not believe this person.
Right, but I'm saying the difference is what he explained to me. The difference is that the AR-15 has the ability to be customized in ways like you can put a scope on it, you can put different things on it that make it better for you, especially if you're using it for sport. If you're a hunter, you can customize it in ways that increase your experience, make you a better hunter. I understand the value in that. I get it. But there's what I kept coming back to is there's a reason why, that the same reason why hunters love this weapon so much is the same reason why it's used in mass shootings.
It's quick, it's precise.
But I'm saying the fact that you can customize it and you can do these things to it to make it so effective.
And you have to look at the odds. The vast majority of people that own that style of gun aren't blowing motherfuckers up.
I know. I get it.
You have to understand that the vast majority of your livelihood, the vast majority of the days of your lives are not at all influenced by gun violence. I'm talking 99.9% of
I'm not even talking about gun violence. I don't want to get those two things confused.
But by someone owning this gun or something, it's so minimal. And when you have a large event, I know it's impactful. I get it. And it's terrible. I don't like seeing it either. I don't know the answer. But my point is the answer is not get rid of them. That's not, I don't think that's the answer. I just don't. It's like someone dies, they smoked weed, right? And someone dies as a result of driving a car because they were high. I don't think that means weed should be illegal.
But if that was happening on a regular basis.
But it's not. That's the thing. This is not happening on a regular basis.
It is comparatively to other countries who have stricter gun laws.
Because it's not a constitutional right.
I know. And at what point, this is what I'm going back to, the fact that the Constitution and its amendments have amendments for a fucking reason. If it becomes so much of an issue that it's a public safety or it's a threat to our well-being as a society.
I don't think it is.
At what point?
I don't think it is. Because again, think about the amount of times, the amount of days. The last thing you're thinking about when you go out in public is, I'm going to get shot up. Unless something happened recently.
I agree. And that happens often.
But
something happens.
Bias.
The only reason it hasn't happened recently is because we're in the middle of a pandemic and there's no large crowds anywhere.
I can't say that. We don't know that.
You don't think that? Okay.
And
that has nothing
crowds.
to do with the second.
There are large crowds.
Not the way that there's not regular concerts, festivals, schools
right.
haven't been in session. It's not the same. There's not as much opportunity during the pandemic.
Maybe.
Definitely. That has nothing to do with the Second Amendment for or against. That's just a fact.
I get it. But my point is the vast majority of the time that you are alive, the vast majority, you are not thinking, I
think it more than I should have to.
Maybe.
Yes, definitely.
I hardly ever.
That's not true. You didn't want to go see, there was a movie that came out, Star Wars, and you're like, I don't want to. I don't want to be a sitting duck in the movie theater.
This just happened.
I know, but they happen often.
I get it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the fact that you can't go see a fucking movie because you're afraid someone's going to come and shoot you is not a way to live.
First of all, I don't like going to movies anyway. Second of all, it's a recency bias kind of thing. And I think that's kind of unreasonable. In hindsight, it's unreasonable for me to think.
But the fact that it happens recent or often enough for that to happen is messed up.
But again,
doesn't have
how
to be
many
that
times
way.
has it happened in a movie theater? 3 times?
I don't know.
Think about how many people go to a movie a day.
Tell yourself this. You're the one who didn't see Star Wars.
No, but I did. I ended up going.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
I went
don't
with you.
even-
I actually saw it twice.
Did we
I
go
went with you
together?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. With my dad,
That's what I'm
right? Yeah.
saying. Think about the amount of people that, non-pandemic, the amount of people that go see a movie every day, the amount of times that people see a movie every day.
I agree.
Compared
I
to-
understand.
So we're talking about 3 incidents out of millions.
I know statistically your chances of being a victim of a mass shooting is very, very low in terms of your daily activity, like things you could do that you might end up dying from. I understand that, but I'm saying when you look at the world comparatively, our country to other countries, we have a disproportionate number of these events happening. And
because it's a constitutional right. We have the
we're
right.
going in circles, right? And at what point does people's safety, the safety of the public, when is that more important? And then, I'm not saying ban all guns. I don't even know where I stand on the assault weapons ban. I really don't, because I think what makes it so difficult is what we said before about the definitions and the statistics and how things are presented. It makes it really hard to take an objective look at whether or not this type of a measure would actually have an impact, because we are looking at statistics that talk about mass shootings in terms of 4 more people, and most people who want to ban assault weapons aren't really concerned with those instances. If it has to do with an armed robbery or gang violence or something, they're concerned about these things that happen at concerts or schools, like these literally like what we consider in common language as a mass shooting.
But again, I think the terminology is important. Concerts, it's happened at a concert.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying it's these large events that we hear about that make you anxious going out to a crowded place. That's not necessarily every time 4 more people die
So
in any circumstance.
Why is the answer, let's put reform on these guns, let's limit it? For example, I'm not saying you're saying this. Let's limit the strength, for
The
lack
rounds?
of a better, whatever, the type of gun, let's ban these. Why is that the solution and not let's amp up the security? Let's have things be more secure. Look, I don't like this idea, but again, it's up to the owner of the club. It's up to the owner of the space. If they want to put a metal detector in order for you to get in, it sucks. But guess what? That's not infringing on my rights.
Yeah, I get it. And that's what we've done.
Okay, so what I'm saying, if now we have to broaden the scope of security, I
understand. I guess what I'm saying, and I do not necessarily have an answer or a stance on this. It's a literal question.
But does that to you sound more reasonable than banning a type of gun?
I don't know, because I don't have a complete understanding of what banning that gun would do. All I know is that it is the preferred weapon in these large mass shootings for a reason.
Prima facie, does that sound more reasonable?
To what extent do I think our kids should have to walk through a metal detector to go to school? No. I think if our kids are at a high enough risk that we're going to arm teachers or pay security guards or retired military or whatever to guard our schools and have metal detectors coming in, I think that we have a problem that's big enough to at least consider reforming the gun reform.
I can't speak to that because I've never had to experience that, and I don't know that. Again, I don't know the psychological effects that could have on a person. I don't know that that's had a large enough study. I don't think that it's been around long enough for us to study it. I don't know. That's
what I didn't say. I said at least consider it.
To me, I value the Constitution. I personally value my freedom of speech. I value the fact that you and I can do this without fearing.
I do too. I'm not saying I don't.
And so if you can value your freedom of speech, you should be able to equally value the other amendments in the Constitution. You should be able to value your other rights in those equally. I don't own a gun, but I value my right to be able to get one.
Sure. I'm glad you said that because I almost forgot to mention it. So I didn't touch on this in my conversation with our friend, but I am curious as to how many people who are very, very pro Second Amendment, pro gun, who feel very strongly about it because it's in the Constitution and every U.S. citizen should have that right, and are against its being regulated for that reason. There's a lot of regulation in voting that I don't hear people speaking out against voter suppression and the different levels of regulation that happens with voting and all the requirements that prevent people from exercising their right to vote. I feel like you should be consistently concerned with those types of things if that's going to be your stance. And I don't hear anyone talk about that.
That's something else that we can talk about in a later episode. I don't know how much cross-pollination there is. There might be.
That's what I'm saying. And you're right. I might have just not heard about it. But it's not something that that's voter suppression and those issues is generally is not something I see coming from conservatives of them being concerned about voter suppression.
See, now you're already do you think there's a liberal that or someone that's left-leaning that loves
Of course.
their
Loves
guns?
guns? Yes. I'm
So
not,
why is this a right thing?
because I have to generalize for the purpose of a conversation.
Okay.
I'm not saying every conservative thinks that. I'm saying in general, when you hear people speak out about voter suppression and the irregularities and the inconsistencies and how difficult it is for some people to vote, generally that comes from the left.
Sure.
And generally the people who are very against gun regulation are on the right.
Okay.
Very generally speaking. And I find it interesting that those two things don't align more often.
It's obviously a bias, but again, I don't
It's just an
know
interesting
enough-
observation.
Sure,
That's all.
I'm sure it is. I don't know enough about either of those issues to see where people stand on either side of the aisle. I don't know.
I'm sure they exist. People who care about both things. I'm
Sure.
just saying it's not really at the forefront of the conversation. I just find that interesting.
Look, my point about all this is that I value my freedoms. I value my rights. I can't stand it before, and I'll say it, outright. Last year was the first time I ever voted. It's last election.
Yeah.
First time I ever voted. I've had people come up to me before that and say, I've told them, I don't vote. I do not believe in the notion that my vote does not directly count to what I'm voting for. Everything in the world you do that for. Twitter polls, anything. It's this vote counts towards the result of this. It's not fucking complicated.
Well, it's because of how the Constitution is written.
I don't care. My point is that my vote should be tallied toward whatever I'm voting for.
So we'd have to change the Constitution.
Whatever. My point is, no, because I think the Electoral College was not an initial thing of the Constitution.
Neither of us have studied the
My
Constitution.
point
I don't
is-
mean to sound like I know everything about
So
the
when
Constitution.
someone says to me before, when I said I don't vote, they say, soldiers have died for the right for you to vote. You should vote. And I say, why did the soldier die for that specific thing? Why, of all the things in the Constitution, they died for that thing. So did they die for my Fifth Amendment privilege? Therefore, if I'm ever on the stand, should I say, look, a soldier died for this. I'm using my Fifth Amendment privilege. Why is it that thing that they died? They died for your freedom of speech. I don't know that that's true. I think they died for the whole fucking package.
Sure, but it's included.
I get it, but didn't they die for the freedom for me not to choose not to do it?
Sure. It's your right. It's not a requirement.
So my point is, when it comes to all these things, I value, the equality of both sides of choosing to do it and choosing not to do it. And if someone chooses to own a gun responsibly and wants to take the steps to educate themselves, be responsible, I have no fucking issue. And moreover, I don't like the idea of someone owning a fucking bazooka, but if you want to own a bazooka and you're responsible with it, fucking go ahead. I don't care. As long as you're not blowing motherfuckers up, I don't care. If you want to, I don't care. And I don't necessarily think there's, maybe with the bazooka, there should be fucking limitations. I get it. But when it comes to assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons or whatever, if you're responsible with it, which is, again, the vast majority
I agree
of
with
people
you.
that
I
own
know
these
it
things,
is. Yeah.
I have no issue. None. And I do believe that if you're exercising your right responsibly, sure, just like, again, when it comes to freedom of speech, I don't think people that go around shouting the N-word, they're using their freedom of speech responsibly.
But it's hate speech.
I don't think they are using it responsibly.
Okay.
They have a right to do it, but I do think there should be like, hey, man, like you should suffer some sort of consequence for that.
Yeah.
So there is.
Well, because it's hate that falls under hate speech very clearly.
Can you
because
get arrested for that?
I don't know.
I don't
It's a
think
good
you
question.
can.
But race is a protected thing.
But I'm saying, even if you can say get arrested for, shouting the N-word.
it would probably be perceived as a threat. So
I don't necessarily have a problem with that either, because you're using your freedom of speech kind of in an irresponsible manner.
right.
It's sort of like owning a gun and shooting up people for the
Sure.
fuck of it. That's definitely using your Second Amendment privilege irresponsibly.
harm other people.
Right,
Yeah.
or you're right, or whatever. I don't. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter to me. My point is that the vast majority of people that own guns, and the vast majority of people in this country that have freedom of speech,
Mhm.
are using it
I
responsibly.
completely agree. That's why the only that's why I'm saying that's why I wanted to break it down and learn more about the specific proposals. And I just don't. I'm sure it exists. There are people who do nothing but study this. I think that there just needs to be a very clear understanding of the cause and effect of these types of reforms. What is the reason why this particular measure is being proposed? What are the potential outcomes? What difference would it make? What are the things it's going to take away from responsible gun owners? And you just have to weigh those things. Like, you just have to weigh it. And that's where I stand. And I don't know. I don't have enough information to make a decision, but I think that's why it's so complicated.
I wanted to get to, before we wrap out, I want to get to what the person I spoke to
Mhm.
said. And again, I don't want to speak for him. I don't want to say what his political leanings are. In fact, I don't know. He's sort of an enigma when it
Mhm.
comes to this.
Well, and the person I talked to is one of the most moderate people I've ever met.
It's pretty peculiar, but I will say out of everyone that I talk to, and people in my life, he's probably the only one that I look up to when it comes to things, like just in general as a
Mhm.
person. But I don't know, he's
I
fucking
know.
Achilles. Anyways, he is Achilles. Anyways, so he says Article 1 or I don't know. Section 22, I don't fucking know,
Oh my God.
of the Constitution of the State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. So this is on the state level
Yes.
he's speaking of. Provides that, quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, end quote, period. End of sentence. No language to confuse the issue about a well-regulated militia like the federal constitution
Mhm.
that we outlined in the beginning. Simply put in black and white, you have a right to own a gun, pretty much. To keep and bear arms is every Rhode Island citizen's birthright, as is revolution. Rhode Islanders burned the Gaspee long before some Bostonians tossed some tea in the water. Shout out to Massachusetts. You ain't as dope as us. Rhode Island was the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. We covered that in the Rhode Island episode. First to reject being ruled by a monarchy. Rhode Island was the last to sign the U.S. Constitution post-revolution. Also mentioned that. Delegates wanted to ensure proper protection for then and still the smallest state in the Union. True. People do not like to hear this, and to acknowledge this does not mean one wishes for it, but an armed citizenry is ultimately the last and final check on a completely tyrannical government, as we mentioned before.
Yep.
Our system is set up so that we can have non-violent revolutions via elections and peaceful transfer of authority. I'm not sure if that was a dig, but it certainly
Mhm.
sounded like one to me. What frustrates me about anti-gun folks is they typically have no experience with weapons. That is true.
Guilty.
I do feel that's
well, I'm
true.
not a strong anti-gun.
They
so,
never
yeah.
shot one, haven't researched anything, often get basic terminology wrong, and affects the entire argument.
Mhm.
Completely agree with that.
Yep.
Semi versus fully automatic, and what that means, for example, in any other instance of polite conversation, let alone political debate, where is it appropriate to just spout off about something you know nothing about that has implications on someone else's constitutional rights, no less?
It happens all the time.
That's true. Guns are inanimate objects, tools really. They do not have consciousness. They do not spring into action and shoot randomly. That's it. I'm a gun owner. I am responsible. I will raise my children how to be safe around guns. None of my weapons sprang to life last night and hurt anyone. So, look, I agree. I agree with what he's saying. I do think that guns aren't necessarily the problem, and it's people that use guns irresponsibly, and I do think the statistics sort of support that compared to the vast majority of gun owners aren't just killing people. They're vast majority, I would like to say in the 90 percentiles.
I bet. Yeah.
So I do think it is bad individuals that get their hands on them that
Right.
are of, a mental, disposition that leads them to these situations or some sort of traumatic event or something.
I understand. And two of the three proposals that we mentioned, the universal background checks and the red flag law, which we didn't really get into too much, but just as another fact about Rhode Island, did pass that in 2018.
Sure.
So we're one of 9 states, I think, that have the red flag laws instated. Those are not about banning the weapon. That is making it about the people. It's doing the background check and having these red flag laws and being able to identify people who do pose a threat and confiscate their firearms.
But how often does that evolve?
I don't know. Like I said, this was in 2018 that this got passed
Yes.
around, so we don't know yet. But I'm saying I have trouble. I would be curious to know specifically if this person supports those types of reforms, because it's getting at what he says is the issue of irresponsible people or people who are unstable or have they have malintent. Getting their hands on the weapons is the problem. So maybe we should put a focus on preventing that from happening rather than banning weapons from responsible gun owners.
That's where I'm leaning. Really, I am. And this is the problem. Again, getting back to the beginning about Biden. If you've made it this far, this is a huge reason why I think he's going to lose the election. I remember texting it to you. He tweeted out, if I'm elected, I will ban assault rifles. And I sent you that tweet, and I said,
When was that?
It was this summer or spring. I remember sending that to you, and I said, he just lost the election. He just lost the election because if we haven't learned anything from Hillary, you have to appeal to the moderates. You have to, and you have to appeal to the
he's
undecided.
the moderate candidate. There were very progressive candidates like Beto O'Rourke who actually wanted to do the non-voluntary confiscation, like not even a voluntary buyback program. They wanted to go out and actually. And so there's a spectrum when you talk about controlling certain weapons or banning. There's levels of that. And I think, I don't know specifically Biden's stance on that now, but I know he was not the most progressive when it came to that issue.
I don't know what the tweet was. I just knew it was some sort of restriction or elimination of a gun or restricting gun access.
But it could have been one of these three. I mean,
but I'm just saying, when I saw that, I said, you just lost.
Yeah.
You just lost this whole thing, because even if you mean it, don't fucking say it, because you already have the left. You already have the people
who care, about that.
You already have them. And if
Okay.
you feel like, yeah, it sucks to spring that on people that are responsible gun owners if you become president. Yeah, it fucking sucks. But still, if the whole point is for you to defeat Trump, you just fucking lost.
Well, I also don't think that that's the highest priority right now for people. And for all the reasons we said, that there
Sure.
haven't been a lot of incidents in this year because of the pandemic, and there's just so many bigger issues. But
my point is again, I don't own one. I've thought about buying one. I've thought about going to a range and just as a means of education, as a means to be like, I feel that I need to know what this is like if I'm going to have a position on it. Again, when it comes to, I don't necessarily think this is a moral issue, I'm saying strictly owning a gun. I don't think the act of owning a gun is immoral. It's morally neutral. I don't think
I agree.
It matters. But when it comes to, like, I know saying the N-word is morally terrible. I don't need to say it or hear someone say it in order to know that.
Right.
So I think that's what differs about this, is just so I know what it's like, and if I become to a point where I become educated and I want to purchase one, and how do I store this properly? How do I store this safely so my 2-year-old doesn't get her hands on it or whatever? How do I do this and become educated? I feel that as a result of that, I'll be more comfortable, and not that I'm uncomfortable, but more comfortable with the fact that there are gun owners around me that don't necessarily want to blow my fucking face off.
Yeah.
And I feel that is the mentality of people when you see or hear, oh, I own an AR-15, there's like a stand back kind of response
people are just uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar.
I feel that sort of not necessarily needs to be eliminated, but maybe in a way needs to get eliminated. Again, I don't want to point names here. I don't like people that glorify guns and stick them all over their fucking wall. I think that's dumb. Like, get a hobby. But,
that is the hobby.
Yeah, I think that's weird, just sort of at that point glorifying the weapon. But if you just have a closet or I don't know,
a small collection or a case,
whatever,
safe?
is it a case, a
I
safe,
don't know.
whatever, chock full of guns, knock yourself out, man. That doesn't make me. It's in a fucking safe,
right?
I don't know. That's just my attitude. I
just think
don't
this
have an issue.
Yeah, I think this is one of the issues that are less, or maybe shouldn't be assumed on what the position is based on the person's political leaning. I think this is one that really is very nuanced. I think there's a lot of different positions you could take, and I think it's just really hard to tease out what the data is telling you and the statistics, with the terminology getting confused and so many people not really having experience with firearms. It makes it really hard.
Yeah.
To have this conversation. But yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty liberal person, if you haven't gotten that yet, and so I think I tend to sway that way, but I really this is not something that this is not an issue that I'd be voting for in this election, for example. Like, this would not make or break it for me.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we just went over an hour. That's it.
Okay. I don't have anything else in me.
All right. Well, that's good. Look, if you made it this far, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate your participation. Look, if you are on either side of this issue, if you are total anti-gun or you want to see more restrictions on guns, we want to hear from you. We want to hear why you feel that way, and try not to make it about because I feel unsafe. Try to make it more about, substantial and measurable reasons why you want these things to be limited, or at least, I don't know, have some sort of
some
constitutional
reform.
amendment about it. Or on the other hand, if you are a gun lover, or you pride yourself on responsibly using guns, which I'm sure you are, tell us why the people may have it misconstrued on the other side. Tell us why there's a misconception, and moreover, try to clear up that misconception. We'd love to hear it. But that's going to do it today. We appreciate you listening. Again, if you're listening to us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, or even on the YouTubes, we appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe. If you're listening to us on YouTube, subscribe to the show. Leave us a like. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please give us 5 stars and a quick review. Subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. We appreciate it. And if you want to get in touch with us on the socials, you can. Go ahead.
We're on Facebook, facebook.com/while she's napping, Instagram @while she's napping, or on Twitter @she'snappingpod, or you can email us at whileshe'snapping@gmail.com.
I don't know what we're going to cover next week. Do you have an idea?
I thought, so this isn't necessarily a policy issue or something specific about the election, but I kind of want to talk about QAnon.
Sure.
And
we'll talk
misinformation.
About QAnon.
Yeah.
It's just got its thread in the election.
It certainly does.
It does. Okay, so stay tuned.
Bye.
All right.